Alright, guys, so here we go again. The Middle East is breaking down again, and everyone's preparing for further escalation, and there's really no end in sight. And what's crazy is how this is shifting international relations. Countries that we thought were friends are now taking sides. We know the US is going to back their ally Israel to the end, China is calling for a ceasefire of all hostilities, but now Russia is moving closer to the Arab world, and Israel is starting to break away. In our lead story today, Israel's fight with Iran proxies in Syria poisons Russian ties. Israel is stepping up their attacks in Syria and they aren't always warning Russia anymore. Now, this is causing the conflict to spill over across the Middle East, and the issue here is that Russia does have a presence in Syria. They are essentially the patron of the country, and these strikes are forcing Russia to choose. And it seems that they have made their choice. Here are two breaking updates that I need to share. It gives us a clue to how this war could really evolve. In response to this strike, Russia has called them unacceptable and how it could lead to regional conflict, and there's a lot of truth to that. Israel has been hammering away at Lebanon and Syria against Iranian proxies, and the big issue is how Iran could be dragged into this conflict unwittingly. Even the US is trying to calm things down now, saying that Iran is seeking to avoid a wider war. Here's what their foreign minister said: "We don't want this war to spread out. They are not receiving orders from us. They act according to their own interests. If what Iran claims is true, they aren't 100% in control of their proxies. So groups like Hezbollah and the Houthis or those in Syria have their own autonomy. And this is where things get tricky for Iran and why they might get dragged into the conflict. The US has warned of a response if Iran or their allied proxies attack US troops, right? So just imagine if Israel keeps pounding Syria, they keep pounding Lebanon, and this causes Iranian proxies to retaliate on American bases. Will Biden order another strike on Syria again? Or will he go after Iran directly? And that's why this situation is one big powder keg in a room full of fire. The longer this drags on, the higher the odds of one party miscalibrating, and then we're thrust into a regional war. Even the US is now worried about this escalating out of control. Blinken is now on a Middle East tour to push for a pause while warning Israel that time is running out. The Arab world is already cutting diplomatic ties with Israel. Even Jordan is pulling out their ambassador from Tel Aviv, which tells you they aren't happy with the crisis in Gaza. However, what's surprising is how Russia has worded their opposition to Israel. Russia's ambassador to the UN has stated that Israel has no right to self-defense as they are an occupying power. Listen to this. The only thing the West can master is continued pronouncements about Israel's supposed right to self-defense, although as an occupying power, it does not have that power. Now, this is a very bold statement that I think could derail bilateral relations forever. With this, it's clear to see that Russia is moving much closer to the Arab states now. And if we want further confirmation, we just have to listen to what Lavrov said. He mentioned how Moscow would support an Arab solution to the Gaza Strip, not an American solution, not an Israel solution, but one proposed by the Arab world. This is a big diplomatic bombshell that we can't ignore. It tells us that after the dust settles, Israel might not be such a good friend to Russia anymore. They will be fully in Washington's camp. And this begs the question why? Why is Russia backing an Arab solution? And it's likely because of America's plan for Gaza after the war ends. Blinken is on his way to the Middle East right now, and it's not just to discuss a humanitarian pause. Yes, that is an important topic, but a big agenda is also to talk to the Arab states about what to do with Gaza after the conflict. Blinken envisions a revitalized Palestinian Authority governing Gaza post-war, so he wants Hamas out of there and to reunify control of Gaza with the governors of the West Bank. Obviously, Russia doesn't want that. America will push for Palestinian statehood, but it will be under their own terms. In the meantime, there could be a peacekeeping force in Gaza that might comprise of American, French, and British troops. And to Russia, this sounds like Gaza will now become a Western base, an American proxy, or Washington ally. And no matter how you call it, it will be a disaster for Putin. The Middle East might be a region in chaos, but they don't want the US extending their influence either. And here's where things get even messier. America might even get Saudi Arabia involved. According to Senator Blumenthal, there has certainly been discussion with the Saudis about their being part of some international peacekeeping force, if only to provide resources and longer term, supporting Palestinian leadership and a separate state. So there is a bigger play involved here that we don't really know. And guess what? it might actually be about oil and gas again. A recent study by the UN found new discoveries of natural gas in the Levant Basin off the coast of Israel and Gaza. That's 122 trillion cubic feet of gas reserves, including 1.7 billion barrels of oil that can be recovered. Now, these reserves are worth at least $524 billion dollars and probably even more today, considering energy prices have gone up. So, US interest in the region might not just be about peace. There could be a very strong financial interest to ensure Western influence over all the resources there. But let's talk about Iran's threats because it keeps coming up again and again. Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah, is now calling for a total embargo. He's demanding an end to the war. He wants the Arab states to cease oil and food exports to Israel. But here's the reality, it likely won't happen. OPEC isn't listening to Iran because the whole region is already extremely unstable. There could be a huge blowback from the Western powers that could affect the entire energy market and oil revenues. Saudi Arabia, for one, won't agree to this embargo. The entire economy is powered by the oil revenues, and if they support such a move, they might have to face consequences from the United States to defend Israel. We are talking about oil price caps and even US dollar sanctions, and at this point in time, MBS needs its oil to keep flowing without any restrictions. In a story by Bloomberg, Saudi budget deficit blows out to $9.5 billion dollars as revenue slip. The oil output cuts are starting to hit the Saudi economy and widening their budget gap. Saudi Arabia experienced an 18% decline in revenues, and they are getting lower receipts from oil and taxes, which is a big problem. We can see Saudi Arabia falling back into a deficit in 2023, with Q3's deficit hitting almost $10 billion worth. Saudi Arabia needs the price of oil above $90 to prevent another budget deficit. And this means they have to maintain their production cuts, but at the same time, they can't afford any disruptions to their oil exports. An oil price cap will be unthinkable, and any blockade of Hormuz will just devastate their economy. So it's very likely that OPEC will resist Iran's call for any embargo. Another signal is the fact that oil is still flowing from Turkey to Israel. Even though Erdogan is calling for brimstone and fire on the economic front, nothing has changed. Israel imports the majority of their oil from Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and West Africa. A huge amount of this transits through Turkey's Ceyhan port towards Israel. The oil is still flowing because it's just business. So I wouldn't put much trust or stock in Iran's economic threats. It's probably just posturing that the Arab world won't listen to. There's just too much at stake which isn't worth it for OPEC. According to ING Bank, the oil market will continue to be in a deficit throughout 2024. They expect prices to average between $90 to $95 next year, which is great news for OPEC, but it's only good if they can physically export their oil out. If the whole region goes up in flames, oil might reach $150 a barrel or even $200 a barrel, but they won't benefit. It'll be countries like the US and Russia that will get richer at their expense. There's this delicate balance at play that the Middle East producers wants to keep. The oil has to keep flowing. Now here's the real concern. We should be afraid of the conflict escalating on the ground. Any economic crisis will be a derivative of that. We know the US struck Syrian bases last week in retaliation for attacks. What if more American troops gets targeted across the Middle East? The Pentagon has said that US forces in Iraq and Syria has been attacked at least 27 times in recent days, and this might only escalate because America has a huge presence in the Middle East. Its military presence is spread across the entire Gulf. There are almost 1,000 troops in Syria and 2,500 in Iraq alone. These are the hotspots today. There are also another 40,000 troops spread across the region, including Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Qatar. And all it takes is for one wrong strike to happen, and the entire Middle East will go up in flames again. And this is where we need to talk about Hezbollah. They are threatening further escalation to open a multi-front war with Israel. During his recent speech, the leader Nasrallah is telling the US to halt Israel's attack to prevent regional war. He has mentioned quite a few things about how Hezbollah is ready for the American fleets and how they are already engaged in this battle since October the 8th. But pay attention to this part. Nasrallah said that escalation would hinge on events in Gaza and Israeli actions towards Lebanon. The longer Israel stays in Gaza, the chance of Hezbollah taking action grows day by day. And I wish I have good news for you, but even America can't save the day today. They have failed to pressure Israel to back down. Anthony Blinken has gone to Israel to sell the idea of a humanitarian pause, right? But Netanyahu has rejected the idea to Blinken's face. And mind you, this isn't even a ceasefire, but just a pause to get aid into Gaza. In a televised statement, Netanyahu has rejected the pause. I made clear that we are continuing full force and that Israel refuses a temporary ceasefire, which does not include the release of our hostages. Israel wants the hostages held by Hamas to be released first before a halt to the fight can be considered. So America has effectively lost control of the situation. There's literally no stop to the conflict until Israel feels that enough is enough. So what is Iran going to think about this? Is Hezbollah going to take action following this piece of news? And if they do, will America retaliate back? Will they target Iranian oil and gas infrastructure? Things have really gone absolutely bonkers and there's very little left to stop any further escalation. But let's wrap this up with the oil markets, right? A week ago, we agreed with RBC's prediction that the US will likely tighten sanctions on Iranian oil. That will be the most obvious economic strike on Tehran, and guess what? It's about to happen. The House has passed a bill to bolster sanctions on Iranian oil in a strong bipartisan vote. The vote passed 342 to 69, which tells you this will likely pass the Senate and President Biden as well. The bill is going to impose measures on foreign ports and refineries that process petroleum from Iran. And the country most affected by this is going to be China. Beijing has more than tripled their imports of Iranian oil and bought 87% of their production in September. If this bill passes, the US will be forced to sanction China if they keep importing energy from Iran. So we can already see the chaos starting to spread. If China can't buy their 1.5 million barrels from Iran, it's going to come from somewhere else. Maybe Russia, maybe Saudi Arabia, but the end effect is still a shortage of global oil supplies. And if you project this out, it isn't hard to see that oil prices could stay higher for longer. Unless the global economy we all crash into a recession, oil demand will be higher than supply, especially if Iranian oil gets taken out. And here's further confirmation of this fear. Oil traders in the market are now paying higher premiums for their annual supply of oil from the Middle East. They are locking in their volumes for 2024, paying over 30 cents more a barrel to guarantee their supplies. Because if Iranian oil gets taken out, the price will spike because the supply will crash. Oil traders are essentially hedging themselves by paying a little more upfront in case the unthinkable happens. So this conflict is getting messier by the day and the threat of things spreading is getting increasingly real. There are many uncertainties up in the air and we can't rule anything out. I don't think either Iran or the US wants further escalations. The stakes are just too high. But if the dominoes fall in the wrong way, we could be in for a nasty ride. But let me know what you think in the comments below. How bad can things escalate? Will the United States cut away Iran's oil exports? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.